Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about dividing by whole numbers. And the first thing that we're going to go over is how we divide in the order in which we do our dividing. So we have an acronym off to the side. Does McDonald's sell burgers regularly? And that stands for the steps you do when you are dividing. So the letter D, does, stands for divide. So we're going to divide the two numbers. Then M, the next step, is going to multiply. So we're going to multiply. Then S for sell, we're going to subtract. Followed by B, bring down. And finally R, repeat. So those are the steps that we are going to do when we are dividing. So we're going to divide, then multiply, subtract, bring down, and repeat the process again. So first thing we have to know are our rules of dividing. So we have two different items that we talk about when we divide. We have a divisor and a dividend. So the divisor is going to be the number that we divide by. So the divisor is the number we divide by. So it's the number we divide by. This is also the number on the outside of the house. So the divisor is the number we divide by outside of our house. And the dividend is the number that is being divided. So the number being divided. That is called the dividend. And that is also the number that is inside the house. So we have our divisor, our dividend. And when we look at the following problems, the first number that we look at is always going to go inside that division house. So we have three examples that we're going to work through today. So I'm going to move this up. Our first example is going to be 250 divided by 5. So I am going to first lay out my dividend and divisor and place them in the correct places. My note to myself was that the first number goes inside the division house, so that means that is the dividend. So I'm going to write 250, and I'm going to draw the house around it. Then my next step is to write the divisor. So the divisor is the second number, and that number for this problem is going to be the number 5. Now I'm ready to start dividing. But before I start dividing, I am going to make some little notes for myself to help me to realize what I'm going to be dividing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am actually going to go above the divisor house, and I'm going to write a line over each number of the dividend. So I'm going to write a line above each number in the dividend. So that tells me how many numbers should fill out for my answer. And then I'm also going to write a decimal place just in case we end up having a decimal when we divide. Just in case. We might not always need that decimal, but it's there to help us if we do. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to divide 250 by 5. So I'm going to think to myself, does 5 divide into 2? Well, 2 is a smaller number than 5, and it doesn't. So my answer would be 0 because 5 cannot divide into 2. That was my first step. I divided. My next step would be to multiply, and I'm going to write a little multiplication sign just so I know that I'm multiplying. 5 times 0 is 0. So I'm going to write it right underneath that 2. My next step is to subtract. So I'm going to do 2 minus 0, and I get 2. Then I'm going to bring down the next number, which is a 5. And now I repeat the whole process again. So I start with dividing. I have to figure out how many times 5 can go into 25. I can skip count. I could say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Or if I know my times table, I know 5 times 5 gives me 25. So I'm going to write a 5 in the next line. So 5 times 5 gives me 25. My next step is to subtract. I get 25 minus 25, which is 0. And I'm done. But there's still one place value left above on my answer. And there's still one number in the division house. So even though it's a 0, I still have to bring it down and divide it. So 5 can go into 0. And it can go into 0 times. Because 5 times 0 will give me 0. I subtract, and my answer is 0. I have no remainder. So the answer to my problem, 250 divided by 5, will give me 50. Let's try another one. So in this problem, I have 309 divided by 3. So 309 is the first number in the problem. So that is the number that goes in the division house. That is the dividend. So I'm going to write 309. I'm going to put the house around it. My divisor is the second number, which is the number 3. So it's going to go on the outside of the house. And before I start dividing, I'm going to write 3 little lines above my dividend. So I know that my answer should have 3 numbers in it. And I'm going to add my decimal at the end of my whole number and bring it up just in case I have to do have a decimal in my answer. So I'm going to go ahead and divide. 3 can go into 3 one time. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. And I'm going to check that and make sure, because 1 times 3 gives me 3. I subtract it. I get 0. And then I bring down my next number. Now I have to see how many times 3 goes into 0. Well, a number times 0 gives me 0. So the next number is going to be 0. 0 times 3 is 0. I subtract it. I still get 0. And I bring down my last number, which is 9. Now I have to figure out the last part. 9 divided by 3 is going to be 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. When I subtract it, I get 0. There's no remainder. So my answer is 103. So 309 divided by 3 is 103. And finally, my last problem, 448 divided by 14. So on this problem, my divisor has 2 digits. So it's going to be a little bit more tricky, but we're going to try our best. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write out my division problem. 448, that first number is called the dividend, so it goes inside the house. Then 14, the divisor, goes on the outside. And before I start dividing, I'm going to draw 3 lines above my dividend, just so I know that there should be 3 place values. And I am going to put a decimal on top as well, just in case we have to do a decimal. So 14, I want to see if 14 can go to the 4. So since 4 is smaller than 14, I know that there is no number I can multiply by to get that. So the number I have to put above is 0, because I need to work in the next place value. So 0 times 14 is 0. 4 minus 0 is 4. And I have to bring down my next place value to start working. So I don't know about you, but I don't know my 14's timetable. So I need to make educated guesses to see if it will work. So off to the side, I'm going to start writing my guess. And I'm going to do 14 times 3. See if it works. 14 times 3, well, I know 4 times 3 is 12. I have to carry my 1. And 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So I have 42. Well, that looks really close without going over, and I think that if I multiply by 4, it would definitely go over. So I'm going to stick with 3. So I'm going to write 3. I'm going to subtract 42, and I'm left with the number 2. My next step in dividing is to bring down the next number, and I have 28. Well, I know that 14 times 3 was too large, so let's try 14 times 2. So 14 times 2, 2 times 4 is 8, and 2 times 1 is 2. That's 28. That's exactly what I needed. So above my little house, I'm going to take that 2. 2 times 14 I now know is 28. I am going to go ahead and subtract 28 from 28, and I get 0. So my answer is 32. So 448 divided by 14 equals 32. And that's what we're doing today. We are dividing our whole numbers.